impact. So today I'm really excited to welcome founder of Little Scribe, Jenny Atkinson. Hi Jenny, how are you going?
Hi, delighted to be here and thanks for the invitation.
Oh no, we're glad to have you here. Can you give us a bit of a spiel, give us an elevator pitch for what Little Scribe is and what problem it solves?
Sure. So the key problem, we've had a decline, not just in Australia, but globally, of our kids' ability to write and communicate what they know in written form. We've actually had a decline for 10 years in every state and in every school year. So we're not passing on that capability that we've got for our kids to have the same capacity. That's not just in the lower areas of writing, it's also in the higher areas. So we've got less kids that are highly capable of actually writing extremely well. And as you know, that connects to everything, whether it's social, commercial, well-being and mental health aspects of our life. And so what Little Scribe does is we're an educational writing platform. And we do a couple of things particularly well. We provide really rich programs to help teachers with important modelled content of writing to share with kids in the classroom. And we inspire them to write. And we also give explicit details and programs for teachers to use. For kids, what that means is we actually transform their writing, which is handwritten or typed text, into instant digital books and calendars and cards. And what they can do is actually get a physical copy of that. So our goal is to actually find all these authors around the country and to make their writing purposeful and to become literacy leaders, not just in Australia, but across the globe.
Love that. So back to, you mentioned that the ability to write well impacts on other parts of our life. So could you just speak to that very briefly in terms of how that is an indicator for success in other areas?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we get really simple into the structure of a sentence, what we've got at the moment is a bit of a trend where our kids are actually pretty good at verbal communication and they're pretty good at other aspects. But when it comes to writing what they know particularly well, so the audience understands that that's not a skill that they're really nailing. We've got a tendency for copy and paste, regurgitation, bullet points. But when we are storytellers, whether that's in business and the application is the future kids that are going to be writing our Facebook posts, our Twitter posts, our legal aspect when we're writing an argument.
Writing our information memorandum for an investor.
Correct, yeah. Or a simple email so that your colleagues understand what's going on, or a training program. All of those aspects where that's a core requirement is not a skill that's being well executed by our kids. And so that applies to every aspect of our life. It also has a really strong connection to well-being and mental health.
Really?
Absolutely. And we're doing some work, and I can talk that a bit later, about kids that have been under pressure from COVID, the fires and the drought, and some really special programs. And what we know is when you write, and I think most people can relate to this, you kind of go into quite a deep subconscious space. Even a drawing or an illustration is part of a story or part of a feeling. And the ability to then put that into written form and to lock that down on muscle memory and connect it with other concepts so that you can actually get a sense of what that means for you and then put that into written form is a very cathartic, powerful process. And if our kids are more skilled to share those concerns, to share those fears and that unknown in a form which may be writing, what a lot of research and a lot of evidence is coming out is that's a very healing process. And contrary to trauma, for example, where we often get regression in learning and literacy skills, if we can actually harness that, we can actually see escalation and real capability in learning, even through those really tough times.
Wow, that's powerful. And I guess unlike articulating what an experience has been, you have to articulate to someone or record it that would be looked at by someone. Writing can be a very personal thing, but you're still like, okay, that's real. Oh, gosh, that's fascinating. That's great stuff. So what inspired you to get into this game? Like, you've been a business management consultant. You've worked in commercial property. It's a bit of a jump.
Yeah, it is. It was accident. And my daughter was home one day when I was working off with a situation that didn't require her to have time off and be sick. So she has a pain condition, and sometimes she just needs to chill out. She's had a bad day. And we had another friend hanging out with her, and I said, right, guys, no tech. So I didn't want to reward time off school with technology and you know.
I have the same challenge,
yeah. So they ended up doing a word puzzle, and the short version of the story is she said, what's an oboe? And I had no idea, and I'm typing away, being busy like we all are, and she meant an oboe. And I thought, how do I explain what an oboe is? And the answer was, ironically, got onto the YouTube, found the Russian orchestra with Peter and the Wolf in the Russian orchestra, and played that. And I said, that's what an oboe is. That's what it sounds like. And then the question came, well, what's this about? And I said, well, it's a story in music, and everything is a story when you actually get down to the nuts and bolts of what we do as human beings. And it's actually about a kid who rights a wrong. And from that, it stimulated them and her little friend to go and spend about 5 hours, very undirected by myself or any input, to write their own stories. So they decided they were going to write stories. We photocopied them, we laminated them, we stapled them. We ended up with a lemonade stand equivalent of books and libraries at the front of the house for when all the kids came back from school. And they wanted people to read them, share them, buy them, rent them, lease them, just interact with them.
So little entrepreneurs themselves too.
Absolutely. And it was interesting because it was just, what next? And where do you want to take this? And so I saw some things straight away that I really loved. One, that they had purpose, and they saw the joy of writing, but the joy of sharing, and they wanted their message to be across. So that was really fascinating, with very little input from me. And I wouldn't describe them as writers, if that makes sense. So it wasn't one of those kids that naturally would do that. Yeah. And then the second thing was, I would like to create a physical book of this, and everything that I looked at in technology wanted to fix it up, and they wanted it to be typed, and they wanted someone else's image to come in. And what was clear to me is, in that moment, it was the best writing they've ever done, and they were very proud of it. And anyone else's thumbprint or cleansing of it simply was a disservice and disrespectful.
It's disempowering. It's Correct. Saying that what you've done is not good enough. So you, from what the kids created that day, you wanted to try and make a book out of it, like a hard copy or a digital version or something, and you couldn't find a product, so you went, oh, actually? Correct. But it's still a big leap, so that's still an idea. I mean, people have dozens of those ideas in their lifetime. You made a big call to actually create a product, though. Did you have a tech background at all, or did you partner with someone who did?
Look, I've been in the forefront of innovation of technology, so this is how old I am. I was at the beginning of call centres, and everyone's going, oh my God, what's that?
Yeah.
And that technology coming in, the transformation of call centres into the internet and online real-time transactions. So certainly been exposed to emerging technology, certainly being exposed to those industries, and love where there's no roadmap. So that's something I'm very comfortable with, and particularly with disruption. So the disruption of the insurance banking industry and telecommunication come to the forefront. And in that was how humans interact with technology. So I've always had a bit of a fascination with the best use of technology to support our learning system, not to put it on hold or to do the learning for the human or the interaction experience. So the next key step is I went and talked to my daughter's teacher and said, oh, I've got this idea, probably got rocks in my head. How would this apply in schools? Would they be interested? And she said, this is amazing. She's been looking for it. It was only then that I actually understood how big the issue with writing was. And I was just gobsmacked that I consider myself a well-versed person and a caring parent, and I had no sense of just how crucial this particular area of education was. And it was kind of like a silent, dare I say, it's a strong word, but cancer that was going on, and no one's really dealing with it, or a silent condition. And I just thought, right, okay, love what came out of the kids' work, love the reactions I'm getting, let's give it a crack. So I did.
Wow. And what were the skills that you had from your previous roles that helped you along the way to creating a startup?
I've pretty much always ended up having some sort of version of my own business, apart from probably the first 5 or 6 years of my business,
Right.
working for an organisation, and that then moved into a management organisation. So what the skills that really have held me in good stead is in that disruption, and whether that's created by deregulation of government, there's new business models and there's a new way of doing business. So I had a lot of exposure both to the commercial modelling aspect, but also then the communication of that new model. How do you talk to a customer for something that doesn't exist? How do you share a product that people don't even know that they need or want? So those two sides of the ledger were kind of interesting, and certainly some areas that I had experience with. Underneath that was also the technology bit. So I'm not a coder. I'm not someone that can get into that detail. I've taught myself a little bit here and there, but would never call myself experienced or capable in that area. But what I did know is how to connect and communicate between a business commercial concept, the design of that, and the coding and the development of that, and how to get good people on board to actually transform a commercial idea into a digital platform or a digital capability.
How did you get good people on board? How did you find them?
Yeah, it's actually one of the interesting things that I've learnt along the way, and I'm not suggesting that I've done it well all of the time. I think it's one of the hardest things. So first of all, mutual passion and connection to what you're doing. And I find that that value system is really important. And often we recruit purely on skills. Skills are always there, and you can always build skills. Connection to passion and values aren't always there. Why is that important to us? Because when you're in a startup, you'll end up doing things that are not in your skill set and not in your job description, but you'll work it out, and you need to work with a team to do that. And that greater purpose helps you cut through the stress, the pain, the dysfunction that's going on, and the fatigue. So that's a lesson that I've learned, is anyone that really gets your industry, gets what you're trying to do, will go out of their way to make it successful. And
that's gold. Because the learning that, the steep learning curve, if someone is moving from a regular job as an employee into entrepreneurship, the learning curve is so steep, and that is tiring. And so that's what you're saying. If you've got people who share the passion, who are of like mind, then you can help get through that stress, or help just work through it and keep moving forward. Yeah,
and then they'll have areas that they're genius at. And so always finding that passion with their genius and their happy spot, and going, right, my role is to go, how do I put them into that spot and own it as quickly as possible and pull myself out of it so I'm freed up, and then going, I'll pick up the rest of the stuff that I might be mediocre at, but I'd rather elevate them and escalate that part of the business, because that skill is there and that capability is there. So that combination of how do you get good people, and then how do you use them effectively.
Yeah, and a bit of humility to be happy to showcase other people and their strengths is what I'm hearing from you. Yeah. Hey, I just want to encourage anyone who's tuning in, throw your questions in the chat bar for Jenny, or in the Q&A, and we'll run them by Jenny. Let's talk about now COVID. COVID has had an interesting impact on Little Scribe. You've had the opportunity to partner with some massive players on the global scale, like the United Nations Earth School. How did that happen? Was it marketing? Was it a connection, or did they come to you? Like, how do you get to hook in with someone that big?
Yeah, it was incredible. And I have to say, I think, are you situated at the studio physically at the moment in the office at York Street? No?
Not today, no.
Okay. So where the studio is, literally 4 floors below, I accidentally bumped into someone unintentionally who was the connection. And so one of the things...
You're kidding.
No.
You ran into them in the corridor.
Well, it was even a bit more ridiculous than that, to be perfectly honest. I was working downstairs behind the coffee shop, and anyone on York Street knows the hub there has a coffee shop and there's a little section behind it. Yeah. And I was working with the team. We had a meeting, and this is a little bit naughty, but I was actually listening to this amazing conversation just to my left, and they were
You're like, oh.
And they were talking about the environment, they were talking about the fires and what was going on in Australia. So this was really around January, where we were in some pretty dire situations. And we were doing a program with kids that were under pressure from the drought and fires and connecting those kids with city schools. And I can talk about that in a minute. So I was just bold and said, look, I was just accidentally listening to you about some of the stuff you're doing. I just wanted to share what we're doing, wondering if we could collaborate or explore some opportunities. And then lo and behold, they were a big advocate. So shout out to Catherine, she was amazing. And she connected us through to the UN and said when COVID happened, and I got a call from them saying, we're looking at this program. We would like to connect with kids that are in a homeschooling situation around the globe, working with the BBC, the TED platform, and about 20 or 30 other organisations to say, how do we provide really meaningful content around Earth for kids to learn from and lean on, to be part of healing and celebration, and to just breathe, if I could call it that. So we ended up writing around 130 activities and programs for kids to access through our platform across the globe. Around 1 million kids participated in that program. And we ended up, they have a series on the TED platform. And if you look at the last one, which heroes some particular work that was written by Little Scribe on behalf of the entire team, and we're involved with a few others. So it started on York Street is the answer.
Wow. So all the more reason to come into the studio. But what you also said is that you had the, I guess, the impetus and the courage to go up and say, hey, sorry, I actually overheard you here, to introduce yourself and what you do. And that takes a bit of guts too. Good on you. Hey, we've got a couple of questions that have just come through. One of them is linking back to what we were talking about, finding the right people. Thanks, Jenny, for your insights. You mentioned finding the right people based on values. How exactly do you screen people during the recruitment process to find the right people who say what they truly feel and know that they are the right fit? Great question.
Yeah, love it. And we are literally just recruiting at the moment to get more people. So this is quite a fresh response. One of the things that we do when we're putting that CV together, we actually talk quite openly about what we're like. We love to laugh. We love to work hard. We're a gregarious group. So we're quite comfortable to share this personality with people as part of the CV. There are some people that are maybe more formal, more structured, and that would potentially be off-putting, and we love a lot of structure, don't get me wrong, but there is a certain vibe with our team that sits there. So opening up about who we are, and that leans in a certain type of response. The second thing is when we are doing this particular process, there's a couple of things that I lean on that work really well for us. I always give them a challenge or a task, and it's real life and relates to our business. So we get them to write a program, we get them to present, we actually get to see them in action. And that gives us an insight to what they're connecting with, how they like to communicate information, what their thinking is around problem solving. So that behavioural engagement is high. And then when we're looking at the third piece is some of the questions we're asking when we do reference checks, for example, is these are some questions I find valuable. To set this person up for success, what are the things that Little Scribe can do to really get them off to a great start?
Great question.
Yeah, and that third person, when it comes to values, insights about that person, will start sharing it with you. And then the other aspect, we do talk about the things, there's a lot of questions around where they've been successful, who are the people that they've been working with, and those questions aren't generic, they're very explicit. Give me an example when. When did, and if I'm looking for a value system about, let's say, sharing and teamwork, then it will be the polar opposites. Explain an example when you're in an environment that you didn't feel that you got to contribute, what was happening and how did you deal with it? And then I'll go with have you led a team? How did you get involvement from everyone in that team potentially? So I'm trying to get both sides of the ledger to really test the value system around how they handle specific situations.
That's great. And those that approach is useful in conversation when, I guess, we're looking for co-investors as well. So on Tuesday, we spoke with David McKeague, who's a bit of a serial entrepreneur too, and he gave some good advice around, being careful when you're looking for investors and spend as much time looking for them as they're looking for you. And I guess in the same respect, it can be for team members who are paid employees as well, if you're in that space.
And they're a big investment because you're putting time and vice versa. And particularly in this world of startup, you can't afford to be turning people over and for that intellectual capital to move from your business, or for it to be distracted, because if I'm spending time here, I'm not putting it into this partnership, I'm not putting it into this piece. So it's equally important. And I can tell you, when it comes to that investment piece and the partnership with investors and that value system, I was quite adamant about what that looked like, and that has paid dividends for us, and particularly when we were under pressure with the COVID situation about what do we do with team, cash flow, all those things that everyone else has been dealing with. It was unequivocally one of the best decisions we've made, is to have investors that got what we were, who we were, and what support looked like. It's been invaluable.
That's great. A couple of other questions. Some of them around that minimum viable concept almost. Hi, Jenny, you're doing fantastic work. According to you've undertaken 3 years to do the research before launching. Were you not afraid that the research findings might already be behind you by the time you're ready to launch? And what do you advise to those wishing to become startup founders who are feeling compelled to just jump in prematurely? Yeah, what time do you have the minimum viable product to take to market? How long?
Look, I actually think there's not one single answer for that. There are certain instances where that arena that you're in requires that reiteration. And I'd almost argue no one's not in a minimum viable product and doing reiterations. And if you're not thinking like that, you've probably got someone chasing pretty quickly that'll surpass you or make an impact on your market. Having said that, when it came to our space, it was understanding a marketplace. The education system, and it's probably one of my frustrations, is actually quite risk adverse, if I dare I say that. And so it means the upside is that when you create a connection and a relationship with them, they're incredibly loyal and you're working together. And so I think the answer for why the decisions we took our time is we worked with a very small group to start with, got really hands-on feedback about what was working, what we needed to improve. So we needed to evolve that product and make a real impact. And so we wanted to go slowly so that when we were ready, we had something that people trusted, something that had a track record, and something that we could show references from people they trusted, which is other schools, other educators. And talking about possibility doesn't resonate as well in that space as it might in other particular areas. It does mean, sorry.
So you had the product out there that you were still working on, but you kept it very small with just a very limited customer base, and then used them as, I guess, the test market before you did your go-to-market launch 3 years later. Is that how?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
And we kind of did things a little bit upside down, and we started in the hardest places first. And the reason for that is those that are having the biggest problem are often the most open. So we worked in country areas. We worked with high socioeconomic problems and literacy areas. So we went into tough areas to see if we could make an impact there. And they were more open to trying, physically everything to make some significant changes.
Interesting choice. And if you can prove it in a tough market or with a tough target group, then your data is all the more stronger when you are expanding.
Yeah,
so do you...
Your truth serum's stronger too. Use it from the feedback. Your
truth serum. I like that. So you use the feedback. I'm mindful that we've only got about another 5 or 10 minutes to go. I want to get through another couple of questions and pick your brains around reframing how we talk to customers during a time of COVID, because you're great for that too. So everyone get your iPads or note apps out for when Jenny starts talking about that. Another question. Hi, Jenny, amazing work. What is your advice on implementing the concept for your one's startup? What are some mistakes to avoid? So implementing a concept and then mistakes to avoid.
Yeah, implementing a concept is there has to be something in there that others lean into and connect to, and that problem is clear. And so the solution may not be, but the problem is. So that concept has to have a very clear problem and a high desire and need to want to solve it. So if it's a low touch problem, you probably, I think, going to find it harder to get traction and involvement. And then I think the second part of the question was mistakes. Was that right? What have I learned?
Mistakes to avoid, yeah.
Yeah. Again, this is a bit contrary to some of the advice. I had a lot of advice in people that were in startups, which is with the minimum viable product or getting to market. Keep it really simple. Just get it out there and test it. That's true for certain. It was not true for us. This is a deep problem that requires a very deep connected solution. And the fact that we've siloed literacy and we've dumbed down literacy, I actually had to bite my tongue and lean on those that understood the space particularly well, which was the educators and the literacy leaders, going, this is not a quick fix. This has been a 10-year decline, and we've got really smart people and they haven't been able to fix it. So I had to really trust who I was listening to and find those experts versus startups versus tech. They didn't actually understand the market, and their advice was not for us the right advice. So checking in on where that source of information comes from.
Excellent. That's a really counterpoint of view, which I think is powerful, particularly when you're working with communities or customers who might be vulnerable in some way, particularly working with people who have experienced trauma or people who have the struggle of poverty or literacy issues. Then you want to make sure that you're not trialing something that doesn't have a really good chance of setting them up for success as well.
Yeah, and I think there's an interesting piece around what you've just discussed, which is purposeful business, right? So we're clearly a business around purpose. And therefore your decision-making and your longevity, because you want to be of something sustainable, is a very different matrix, to be perfectly honest, to something that's looking at commercial outcomes straight away and profits. So they are not the same thing, and we merge those conversations a lot. So get really clear. Are you in there for instant commercial, market share grab, etc. versus purpose? And both are okay. Don't get me wrong. I've got no issues with both models, but they do require different thinking and strategies.
And this is when, going back to what you were talking about for recruiting team members or having co-investors, making sure you're on the same page about that very separate or that very distinct difference. What are we here to do? Are we in it for create tech, get it out there, try and make a quick buck, sell, or is it a purposeful business that we have a different intention? And so we will see the journey in a different way. Okay, that's a really good link there. You've spoken with me in the past about reframing or rebranding, rebadging businesses to be able to talk to customers better during a time of COVID, which has created such heightened psychological stress. What's your advice on how to do that better?
Look, I think we've gone through different phases, and the first phase of that process was fear and a instinct to want to jump in quickly and to solve it or fix it or understand it so I had more control. A lot of people felt very much out of control because they didn't have their typical tools and utensils to work with. And so that requires very clinical, clean, simple communication. This is the problem. This is how I can help you. And to put that phraseology around of being of service, I think is really important, as opposed to instant commercial gain. So that's your opportunity to position as a partner. That's your opportunity to be of service. and to talk about how I can help you in this pain point moment right now without having to jump a lot of hurdles and considerations, so that you can breathe and get stock and get back into a comfort level to make longer term decisions. I think we've moved into a different phase now, and I'm quite clear of our experience in Australia broadly is very different, and we've got a lot of communication going on in the US, the UK as an example. So this commentary is quite Australian focused as opposed to offshore, because the pressures and longevity is different. There is a bit of sense of getting back to normal. There is a bit of sense of, can I now make a medium decision? I don't even think long term's there. So having a very different relationship or a different communication, again, it's simple, very few barriers to entry, and making that message and understanding what their needs are very quickly. And we did a lot of work around checking in and doing a health check on need and a health check on capacity of our customers to take information, bombarding all the time as opposed to responding when they were ready was a really critical part.
How do you find out when they are ready for information?
Yeah, there's some really simple techniques. One, how do you prefer to communicate? Now, we often always do it by email. It might be SMS. It might be a informal, once a month, we're going to be available to just do a chat and you can come and connect with us then. So giving lots of choices, and choices that work for them, not for you as a business. Yeah. So that would be point one. And that you'll see is informal contact, because they go, you know what, I'm actually ready, or I could do that conversation now. I couldn't do it last term or last month.
Yeah.
The second piece, sorry.
No, go.
The second piece is the way that we do connect, and we've got better at this. And Jo Edwards, who heads up our education teams, just marvelous at this. It's, here's a little bit of support and help. And by the way, when you're ready, we're here. And so one of the first philosophies and phrases that we came up with literally within 24 hours of Australia deciding that we were going to go into lockdown was, we're here, lean on us. And what I didn't want to do, and some of the language that we chose not to use, was pandemic. Some of the choices we chose not to use was unprecedented. We chose to use the word unfamiliar. And that is less traumatic. It's less sensational. We didn't need to add to that language and that emotion. It's lean on us. We know it's unfamiliar. We're familiar faces. How can we help you?
Nice. And what sort of an impact did you get with that?
Amazing. We work with some of Australia's leading authors, and I had them all instantly on a Zoom meeting within a week and said, our kids are in lockdown, our teachers are under pressure, what can we do? And we had two initiatives. The first one is we had all of the authors do a session that was free to every kid and teacher and parent who was going, what am I juggling? How do I do this? We had over 100,000 views of that within a week or two. And that was with Jackie French, Tristan Banks, Oliver Pomervan, and a whole list, Andrew Daddo, that I could go on with. So that was very well received. And then the second big event that we did, which was really listening and doing micro moments and understanding what they look like, was the Mini Writing Festival, which is now an inaugural event, which will be run annually in the lead up to Book Week. And we had 35,000 kids connect with us for live 45-minute sessions with our authors around the country, and all of them were doing writing activities and the authors were modelling work, and you can see that on our Story Starter wall. So they're some classic examples of how that came about when the time was right.
So a bit of authentic communication framed in a way that didn't sensationalise but showed support for the biggest pain point, resulted in some pretty massive responses. Yeah. We've got one more question. Oh, a couple more. Hello, your work is so interesting and very helpful. For those interested, how can we get more involved with Little Scribe? Well, you're recruiting at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah. There's a couple of things I'd love for those that like the idea of really supporting kids in literacy. I'm not sure how we could set this up, but we've got some kids that are about to share their books and they're looking for an audience. So the first simple thing is I'd love to be able to share some of that work and just get you to read it and make a comment, because the kids, there's nothing quite like that purposeful bit. So that would be amazing. The second thing is, we're like every business, we're in growth, and I'd love to connect with schools, literacy leaders, and bring them on board. I haven't even touched some of the depth of the programs that we're doing, but we'd really love to connect with more schools. So they'd be my two big things I'd love to hear more about. I'll park a third one in case there happens to be this random person out there, because, you know, look at the UN, who knows if you put it out there.
Exactly.
We do have some schools that are under a lot of pressure, and there's an opportunity for some philanthropic support as well to support those schools in their journey and commitment to literacy. So those families are not in a position, and the schools are really scrambling for every dollar. So anyone that might feel inclined or interested in that, I'd love to chat to as well.
Great. If there's any links that you want to pop up into the chat bar, do that. Jenny, maybe grab some. We've put the story starter wall.littlescribe.com. We've got, of course, the website there. While Jenny is finding us a couple of links in response to your question, thank you for that. I'll let you know a little bit about who our guest is next week, just as we're wrapping up today. Next week at midday, join me to pick the brains of Money Girl founder Mariam Mohammed. Money Girl is a great organisation, that an entrepreneurship, a startup. But Mariam started originally in public policy, so she's going to speak a little bit about how she made the leap from public policy to entrepreneurship. She'll also give us some great advice around managing our own finances and why that impacts on how we manage our startup finances. So that's going to be next Tuesday at midday. For now, thank you, Jenny, for putting your contact details in that chat bar. Anyone who wants to talk in with Jenny, you've got it there in the chat bar to the side of the Zoom screen. Thank you so much. I mean, gosh, I could talk to you for ages. Keep up that amazing work, and hopefully we'll hook back in again with you at some stage next year to see how the journey's going. And
shout out to the studio. Every time we are looking for support or wanting to get an idea or connect with someone, they've just been extraordinary as part of that process. So that would be my last wise words, is to lean in, because there's some real capability and connections with the studio that's certainly served us well. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And also now, if you check out the studio website, it's had a little work done. You can now book a hot desk space, meeting space, auditorium, podcast booth, full sound production studio. You can book a green screen room for video production. All of that can be booked and paid online. Of course, if you're a member with the studio, all of that is available for you anytime that you like. So check out the studio link. And for now, let's wrap it up. See you next Tuesday. And I'm Wendy John. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye, everyone. Thank you.